everyone. How's everyone doing? All right, energy, yes, at the back as well. All right. No, yeah. So here we are, finally, which is pretty awesome. As many of you know or may know, it was actually Jen's idea to do this. So the spark for ICCM was really inspired by her about a year ago. Just dropped me an email and saying, hey, how about a little workshop on crisis mapping? And I thought that was actually brilliant, and I turned little into big, and then we got it out of hand, and here you are. So, but I hope you get a chance to talk to Jen over the next few days. She's actually done some pioneering work in the field of crisis mapping with her dissertation and onwards. So thanks, Jen, and thank you for John Carroll University as well for having us here. I like how it's alternative and a bit different from what you might be used to, so we'd like to definitely have that continue over the next few days and hopefully the next few years as well. And of course, our donors, OSI, HU, and USIP couldn't really be here, obviously, without them. And it's been great collaborating with them for the last 12 months. It's just been wonderful to collaborate with, and their commitment to crisis mapping. And it's still fairly a new field, a new word of sorts, but they get it, and we really, really appreciate that as well. And then, of course, all of you. It's pretty remarkable. We've got folks who are seasoned humanitarian practitioners and human rights experts. We've got leading scholars from a number of institutes as well who've been pushing the field of crisis mapping forward. We've got policymakers as well, high-level policymakers from different organizations. Got some very innovative tech developers, software developers who are also the leaders in what they do here as well. And then some of our donors are here as well. So this is just a great group to have this kind of conversation. Really looking forward to having collaboration come out of this as much as possible. I think that's part of how we get to move the field forward. So there we go. We're excited. And in terms of how we're going to do this, there's a kind of crisis mapping taxonomy that we've all been playing around with over the past 2 years, which is how, in part, we got in touch with you through the Harvard Humanitarian Initiative and my colleagues, Dr. Leaning and Greeno as well. We had this 2-year program on crisis mapping. And really, the conversations that we've had with you sort of have informed some of our ideas on crisis mapping. And we see a 4-point framework here. And the reason I just want to outline this is because this is what we've based the agenda on. So, and it's self-evident. This is definitely not rocket science or anything. But crisis map sourcing is simply how we start collecting information. There are different methodologies that we can go about doing that. There are some advantages to some of these methodologies, and there are new sort of crowdsourcing approaches which have some interesting challenges, but also promises. Satellite imagery, mobile technology, and so on. And once we collect that information, we want to visualize it in a compelling way. And so there are various techniques, but it's still fairly new. We don't really have best practices on how we visualize complex data and so on. So that's crisis mapping visualization. Again, really, I think, makes sense in terms of the coherent approach. And then analytics. It's not enough to simply do cartography. Even though we can do very good cartography, we want to start then exploiting some of these models in geospatial analysis to start identifying patterns that are underlying in this data that we have. And then, of course, this is a very exciting intellectual field as well. We're definitely pushing new ideas forward, but it's also very much an operational field. So we want to take all these 3 components and bring them together. And we actually have some really great practitioners from the field here with us today, whether it's Bogota, Colombia, or Khartoum, Sudan, who are really leading the way in their own fields as well in terms of where the rubber hits the road with crisis mapping. So we really want to make sure that we bring all this within a decision support kind of tool and that we push it forward and we actually have that serve as some added value. So those are going to be the 4 roundtables that we're going to have over the next few days. I'll go into a bit more detail at the start of every roundtable about some of the core questions and then the format of those as well, and we're going to start this afternoon. There are 4 other sort of features of ICCM 2009. The Tech Fair is really a great opportunity for those of you who've developed some really amazing tools to demo those tools to us, and so we can get familiar with them, ask questions, and potentially to see how we might be able to use them in the field or how we might want to customize them in order to make them useful, extra useful for us. We'll have our keynote tomorrow morning. Our colleague Dr. Jennifer Leaning will be giving a keynote address on patterns and the patterns that we see in humanitarian crises and how we can start leveraging the field of crisis mapping and crisis mapping patterns and methodologies to start getting at the underlying patterns. And then we have the self-organized sessions on Saturday afternoon. And this is really where each of you take the driver's seat. This is where we're relying on you to make sure that you define the questions and the conversations that absolutely need to happen here with all of you present. We're going to be looking at continuing some of these conversations after, obviously, the conference. It's just sort of an inaugural. It is the first international conference of crisis mapping. So it's going to be a launch pad and a springboard for future conversations. But we're really looking forward to the self-organized sessions. They're really core and critical to the conversations that we have here. And of course, the Ignite talks, which we're going to kick off within about 5 or so minutes. 5 minutes, sort of tops limit. Everybody's going to give a 5-minute presentation that has signed up to the Ignite sessions. Pretty strict 5 minutes, but the idea here is to basically give everybody here, including us, a good sense of who's in the room, who's doing what, and have an idea of who we want to talk to and continue talking to as well throughout the rest of the few days. Usually in conferences like TED and otherwise, you have them spread out over a few days. And we went back and forth thinking, well, do we spread them out, or do we take everybody when they're still fresh on Friday morning and get everybody up to speed? And we decided to go with that, so that hopefully then that can help enrich our conversations during the roundtables and the self-organized sessions and so on and so forth. So we don't have like a new surprise that sort of pops up on Sunday and we've missed the opportunity to really talk about it. So that's sort of the idea of the agenda and what we're going to have. You may have noted also in some of our tweets or on the website, this is a conference, but it's also a platform to start launching this international network of crisis mappers. And what is the international network of crisis mappers? It's basically you, it's basically us. This is the room here. And what we want to do on Sunday when we wrap up the last roundtable is basically have an open conversation about what do we want to do as a group, as a network? How can perhaps Jen and I be helpful over the next year to continue catalyzing the conversations and the collaborations and so on? And what would you like to see? What would you like to also contribute and so on? My colleague Jeff Pinnock at WFP and I had a conversation a few months ago about the need for some kind of database of crisis mapping platforms or initiatives and early warning systems and so on and so forth. And he's very kindly taken the lead on that. He's going to say a few words on Sunday when we have this 1-hour open conversation about the field, really, and where we go from there. And he's really looking forward to getting your feedback, because obviously he's not developing that database for himself. It's really for us, and how can we better share what we're doing in our work. And then finally, even though we haven't really started ICCM 2009, believe it or not, we've already had conversations and questions about ICCM 2010. We had literally started a year ago with a 20 people participant list. You're about 80 now or 60, and there are going to be another 20 coming in the next few hours. So it's obviously struck a chord. And we want to continue sort of facilitating the conversations as well. And again, this 1-hour conversation that we're going to have on Sunday is about this community-driven process. What do we want to see at ICCM 2010? What kind of content do we want to start talking about? And the participants that we want to see, and so on and so forth. So we'll be using the website, slightly revamped a bit. It'll allow you to basically upload and just add your thoughts and participants and so on. So it's going to be very active, and it's going to be driven by you. So we'll talk about that on Sunday. So that is basically it, I think. We're going to have 2 sessions for the Ignite talks. We have half an hour break in the middle for more coffee and so on. We've got about a dozen or so talks per session, and I think we'll just kick it off now. So thanks again for coming, and we're really excited to have the conversations come out of this really drive the field. So give us a few minutes, and we'll get started. Thanks very much. Cheers.